Me again. A couple of things I didn't include in that first introductory video. So this is an addendum to that. Take note, please. These will be questions on the exam. So number one, right? The state of Nevada does not have an income tax. There's a few other states who also don't have income taxes, but it's generally pretty unusual. Right? And the reason we are able to do that is that we have a tourism economy. Did you ever notice that? About 40 million people visit Las Vegas every year. We're only a population of about 2.3 million, and we get 40 million plus visitors every year. All right, so what does that mean politically? It means that state legislators are going to be like, wow, 40 million visitors a year, maybe they could help pay our taxes rather than putting that burden on the people who live in Nevada. Because those are our constituents. Those are our voters. If we can take some of the burden off of our voters and put it on our visitors, it's a political win. And we're able to do that because we have 40 million visitors a year. So that's why we don't have a state income tax, right? Is that you can shift some of that gap. Now there's a gap. You don't have a state income tax. You can shift some of that onto visitors, right? The gaming tax. Now, certainly locals also pay the gaming tax, but right, disproportionately it's paid for by visitors. The sales tax, to some extent, right, is going to be paid for by visitors who do high-end retail while they're here. So we've managed to shift, right, some of our taxes from voters in Nevada to visitors to Nevada. Now, you want to limit that to some extent because you don't want to drive away visitors, but that's going to be tempting politically for that reason, though, right? That if legislators can lower taxes on we the people of Nevada and shift it on to visitors, that's politically very attractive for them. Somewhat related to that, right? What is the deal? What's the deal with Allegiant Stadium and the Las Vegas Raiders? Why did the Raiders decide to move from Oakland to Las Vegas? Long story short, right, Mark Davis, the owner, primary owner, was shopping around to other cities. Hey, do you want an NFL franchise? Yeah, well, if you do, give me a proposal for how you can help me. Help me help you. What can you do for me? Right, basically a request for proposals. And under American federalism, right, private investors can do that. They can play one state off of another because each state will have its own unique tax policies. If we had a unitary form of governance here in America, which we don't, all states would have the same tax structure, and there wouldn't be leverage by private investors to play one state against another. But we don't have a unitary form of governance, nor should we. We have federalism, right, which gives states a lot of room to do their own thing, their own tax structures, their own tax policies, right? So investors are like, wow, great, great. Let's play one state off another to see if we can get a good deal. I mean, it only makes sense, right? It's only business, nothing personal. It's only business. So Mark Davis said, make me a deal. And Nevada said, we will make you a deal. We'll offer to help you build Allegiant Stadium on the fabulous Las Vegas Strip adjacent to it. Right? We will pledge you money. And Mark Davis said, that sounds good. What are the numbers? And we said, $750 million up front to help build the stadium. I think it ended up costing about $2.5 billion. But we helped cover that, right? And then you might ask yourself, well, dang, right, how did Nevada come up with that money up front? We're not that big. We don't have money laying around to give to Mark Davis, who's a billionaire. So we said, well, the governor, right? The governor gets a team together. They come up with this proposal. That proposal then goes to the legislature. You call the legislature into special session because they only meet for 4 months every 2 years. So you call them into special session. You have them debate the proposal and then vote on it. right? And the Nevada legislature voted in support of that proposal. So signed, sealed, and delivered to Mark Davis. We'll give you $750 million because we think that's a good deal for Nevada. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to sell debt to investors across the country and across the globe. It's called floating a bond issue. It's the way state and local governments fund big projects up front. They float debt to finance that and then pay that debt back over decades. This is good shit to know, by the way. All states do some version of this for all sorts of large projects. Public aquariums, museums, perhaps, convention centers, sports stadia, right? So we said, okay, how are we going to pay that back over, I don't know how many years, 20 or 30 years? How are we going to pay that back? With interest, right? Because to attract investors, you need to pay them interest so they make a profit. They're buying your debt. You got to pay that debt back plus interest. Of course you do. And you sell this debt, right, in what are called tranches, chunks, right? Because you don't want to sell $750 million in debt to one investor, probably. That's going to be hard. So you want to break it up into much smaller pieces. I don't know what the size of the pieces were, probably variable sizes. Let's make it simple for me and say they created 750 tranches of debt, right? And each tranche was $1 million. Hey, investors, do you want to buy $1 million in debt? You give us $1 million and we'll pay you back over 30 years plus interest. And the investor will be like, okay, if that interest is high enough, I'm interested, but how are you going to pay it back? What's your source of revenue? Is it reliable? Is it a good bet by me, the investor, who I do take risks, but I don't want to be an idiot about it? And we said, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to bump up the hotel room taxes on the Strip, mostly, but also on any hotel anywhere in the valley at a lower level of bump. And that'll be enough to generate a payback over 20 to 30 years plus interest. We think that's a reliable source of revenue. Unless we run out of water, knock on wood, unless we run out of water, that's going to be a reliable source of revenue, right? Hotel room taxes. And they said, great. We'll take that deal. So we sold that debt quite easily to investors across the country and across the globe. And now we're in the process of paying it back each year, plus interest, with a bumped up hotel room tax, which is mostly paid by visitors, right? So politically very attractive. Although you don't want to raise that rate too much or you scare the visitors away. There's a trade-off. Right? So that's how that's done. It's controversial. I'll generate a discussion thread on this. It's controversial, right? Should the state of Nevada be giving so much money to Mark Davis, who's already a billionaire? Well, to get the stadium, arguably that's what we had to do, is the counter to that. But others say, dang, man, we could have used that money for other things, you know. Other things like public education, K through 12. And I would say this, right? Because that's a standard argument. Why not K through 12? Give them $750 million, bloody hell. And the argument is you can't bond out public education because it doesn't generate revenue. So you can't do a bond issue to give public ed $750 million up front. Now, what we could have done, although it would have been politically impossible, we could have raised the hotel room taxes and then devoted that revenue stream every year to K through 12 public education. And it would have added up to $750 million plus interest over 20 or 30 years. But that clearly wasn't going to happen politically as a no-starter. But that's the counterclaim. All right. So, and there's other ways states can compete with one another for investment. Typically, it means you eliminate or lower certain taxes, state and local, for a period of years to attract investment. That's how the Tesla battery factory got built up north. I think Elon Musk was going to locate in northern Nevada anyway because of access to lithium. It's not commonly found in most states. I think we would have gotten the investment anyway, but we wanted to make sure. So the governor's team negotiated a deal, debated by the legislature, approved by the legislature, and we gave Tesla all sorts of tax advantages, pegged to certain accomplishments by Tesla. That's the evolution of these deals over the decades. Used to be states would just offer these deals with no strings attached. And sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. Sometimes that company initially invested and then pulled out and went elsewhere. That can happen, by the way, with sports teams. So that's something we don't control, I don't think. I don't think there's any way to control that. Could Mark Davis pull up stakes in 10 years and move them, the Raiders somewhere else, and we'd be left with a big stadium? We do have other uses for it, but its primary use, right, is for NFL football games. We'd be a little bit high and dry. That's a risk that states take. But with tax advantages that states negotiate with investors, there you can set standards, right? So I think Tesla has to, meet certain markers to get tax benefits, like, no property taxes for 10 years or whatever. I don't know the details, mind you. Let's say no property taxes for 10 years if you invest this much money by this date. Reduce corporate taxes if you employ this many people at this wage by this date. If, right? So those tax advantages only kick in if certain markers are met by the investor. And I believe that battery plant up north has been meeting those marks. And I think we extended them additional benefits recently with more markers that need to be met. So again, right, it's controversial. Should Elon Musk, who's the world's wealthiest man, should he get tax benefits from Nevada, and that cuts our revenue? Some would say yes, because without that we don't get that factory, and we do better in the long run economically by giving up some tax revenue initially to get things on the back end and get investment and build the northern economy. Others say, you kidding me? Elon Musk, he gets Nevada tax money basically by getting tax breaks? I don't think so. So these things are controversial, but it is a function of American federalism. The state and local governments have their own unique tax policies and all sorts of policies unique to them. And investors know that. And they get states to compete with one another for investment. Some say that's a good thing about federalism. Some say it's a bad thing. Speaking of mining, lithium and gold. Gold is mostly what we mine in Nevada now in terms of value. But I think increasingly it's also going to be lithium. Silver is not such a big deal anymore. It was back in the day. Mostly now it's gold, interestingly enough. We wanted to be renamed the Golden State, I guess, but California already had that. So we have the Silver State, even though we're not really the Silver State anymore. But it's historical and kind of interesting. So I had mentioned in one of those PowerPoint narrated slides, right, that we did get the mining tax raised turns out in 2021. The legislature said, hey, mining industry up north, come on, man. You have the deal that we gave you in 1864, 5% of net profit. That's like less than 1% of state revenue. Get out of town. These are big mega companies, transnational corporations, and when they're done mining here, they're going to leave and never come back. You need to pay more of your fair share. It's hard to change the 5% of net profit because that's in the Constitution. So they just did a legislative add-on. It said mining companies above a certain size, I think it's basically Barrick and Newmont, mining companies above a certain size, you need to pay an additional 1%, I think it was, an additional 1% of net profit each year. So, that's definitely helped. It's generated a little more revenue. I think right now the mining tax revenue counts for about 2% of our state budget. It's still really small, but it's double what it used to be. You take what you can get sometimes in politics. So that was a legislative maneuver in 2021. I would like to see more of those maneuvers going forward, but we'll see. The mining companies are quite powerful politically. Recently, Barrack moved their corporate offices to southern Nevada, to Henderson, realizing they needed a corporate presence here because that's where voters are. That's where the power is in Nevada. It's not up north for the most part. It's down south. So they've established corporate offices here to sort of lobby for their rather preferred tax status. And they're doing quite well with that. It's politically smart to do that. Finally, question on the exam coming up, so you need to know this. When Brian Sandoval was governor some years ago, moderate Republican, a never-Trumper Republican, someone who I admired a very great deal and still do. He's currently the president of University of Nevada at Reno. Kind of a Reagan Republican, a kind of Republican that hardly exists anymore. He was a big deal back in the day. Some thought he had national aspirations, and then Trump came along, and things went south for him in that sense. He's doing great. He's killing it. He's the president of UNR. I'd take that job. That's a good deal. He's a good guy. He had worked a budget some years ago. Right, a Republican. Republicans at the time, I think this would have been 2015. Republicans at the time controlled both the state Senate and the state Assembly. They had majorities in both chambers. Sandoval's view was we need to raise corporate taxes here in Nevada to fund public education. And Republicans in the legislature thought that ain't going to happen. What do you need in Nevada to pass a tax increase? 2/3 of both chambers. It's a stupid procedural requirement passed under Governor Jim Gibbons some years before that. He was an idiot. He was an idiot. Look him up. But he had sort of pressed for that, and the legislature gave it to him. Yeah, 2/3 in both chambers to get a tax increase. They carve out for that one policy. Everything else is 50% plus one. But tax increases, 2/3. So, right, you're thinking, wow, how's Sandoval going to do that? How's he going to get 2/3 in both chambers for a tax increase when Republicans control both chambers? He worked it. He made it happen. It was amazing. He got all Democrats in both chambers and just enough Republicans in both chambers to get to 2/3 in both chambers for the modified business tax. Dedicated revenue stream to public education. Now look, I have issues with this idea of dedicating revenue streams to certain policies. It's kind of a marketing ploy, right? Because dollars are fungible. Every dollar of tax revenue is like every other dollar of tax revenue. Dedicating a particular stream to a particular budget item is somewhat empty, right? Because the legislature ultimately decides each year how much state money should go to public ed K through 12. And then they'll say, right, oh, a lot of that's going to come from the modified business tax. So to the extent that we can use that to fund that number, we can start to divert other state revenue that had been going to public education, like the sales tax. We can divert that to other state priorities now because so much of it's being picked up by the modified business tax. Right? So dedicating a revenue stream to public education, which I'm not really against per se, it's not really meaningful in terms of the final outcome of any budget. It doesn't tie the hands of the legislators at all. They just move dollars around to meet the numbers they think are correct. You know, dollars are fungible. Every dollar is just like every other dollar. You don't have special dollars that say modified business tax and other dollars that say sales tax. They're just dollars raised by the state. Anyway, but I understand why Sandoval did it that way, right? It's politically appealing to say it is a tax increase, but it goes for something that Nevadans prioritize, K through 12. So he got that done. It was rather shocking. This was, again, 2015. What was the outcome of that in the end? Sandoval was reviled by a rising tide of MAGA Republicans who said, are you out of your mind? What happened to the Republicans in the legislature that went along with that? reviled by the rising MAGA forces. When did Trump come down that golden staircase in New York City? 2015. And so there was a point where I think the Republican Party thought we might need to go in Sandoval's direction, become more moderate, more reasonable, if you will, more centrist. And that's the solution to get back into the political game here in America, because Obama had just won 2 consecutive terms by good margins, and Democrats were on the front foot. And Republicans are like, we got to fix our shit. How do we do that? And many thought it was pursue the path of moderation. That was also Marco Rubio, by the way, at the time. That was a sense of where the party might be headed. Guess what? That's not where the party was headed. That's not where they were headed. They went down a very different path indeed, the path carved out by Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. So Sandoval got exiled from politics. The Republicans in the legislature who went along with that tax approach all got forced out. And it became Trump's party, which is not a party of moderation or reasonableness for the most part. It's very, very combative, very into conspiracy theories. Don't get me started. A different party than that. Okay? This is no longer Ronald Reagan's Republican Party. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party, top to bottom and everything in between. And it's proven to be in some ways quite effective, politically, of course. All right. Take care, all.